The CEO took her deaf daughter to the company dinner, and the black single dad sign language made her smile. But right now, no one's smiling. A live stream is happening. 15,000 people watching in real time. The comment section is on fire. At center stage stands a woman in a designer suit, polished, perfect, practiced. The CEO of a billion-dollar pharmaceutical company. Beside her, a 12-year-old girl, her daughter, deaf, sitting in a chair like a prop. The CEO is mid-speech. Something about listening, about accessibility, about caring for patients who can't speak for themselves. The irony is suffocating because there's no interpreter. No one translating her words for the deaf people in the audience. No one translating for her own daughter. Then the girl stands. The CEO reaches for her, tries to pull her back down. The girl jerks away. She faces the camera, and she starts signing. Her hands shake, but her message is clear. My mother doesn't understand me. Nobody listens. I'm invisible. The live stream chat explodes. The room goes dead silent. Then from the back of the auditorium, a man rises. Tall, black, silver locks pulled back, work boots and a canvas jacket that doesn't belong in a room full of tailored suits. The overhead lights catch the deep brown of his skin, the silver threading through his hair. He walks toward the stage, every step deliberate, controlled. The CEO waves him off. Sir, sit down. He doesn't sit. He steps to the edge of the platform, looks at the girl, and his hands begin to move, fluid, effortless, like water. The girl's face transforms. She starts signing back, faster now, raw, breaking open, and he translates. Every word, every emotion, not the CEO's script, the daughter's truth. Someone in the audience gasps. A woman stands, signs, and speaks at once. That's Jerome Hayes. The CEO's expression shatters. The camera keeps rolling. If you believe that real power isn't found in a title, it's found in the willingness to listen, then stay with this story. Because what happens next will restore your faith in quiet strength and shatter your assumptions about who gets to be heard. Before we begin, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments, have you ever been in a room where no one could hear you? But to understand how we got here, to this moment, this confrontation, this reckoning, we need to go back 3 weeks to a basement and a rooftop, to a man the world forgot, and a daughter who never stopped believing he was extraordinary. 3 weeks earlier, the alarm went off at 5:30 in the morning. Jerome Hayes reached over and silenced it before the vibration could travel through the mattress to the smaller bed across the room. Too late. The lamp on Naomi's nightstand flicked on. She sat up, braids askew, and signed with one hand while rubbing her eyes with the other. I'm already awake, Dad. Jerome smiled. He swung his legs out of bed and stretched, feeling the familiar pull in his lower back. 53 years and too many hours bent over machinery. He pulled on sweatpants and padded across the small room to Naomi's bed. Good morning, he signed. She grinned and launched into rapid-fire signs about a dream she'd had. Something about astronauts and a talking dog. Jerome nodded along, his hands moving in response, asking questions, laughing at the right moments. The duplex was small, but theirs. 2 bedrooms on the second floor, a narrow kitchen and living room below. The walls were covered in Naomi's drawings, rockets, planets, constellations labeled in careful print. Jerome had framed a few of the better ones, but most were held up with painter's tape that left no marks. Downstairs, he started breakfast while Naomi got dressed. Eggs and toast, orange juice in the chipped blue cups they'd had since she was 3. She came down wearing her favorite shirt, the one with the solar system across the front, and climbed into her chair. Science project, she signed, pointing to a poster board leaning against the wall. I need to explain Hawking radiation. Jerome cracked an egg into the pan. That's advanced. I know. She beamed. That's why it's good. He plated the eggs and sat across from her. They ate in the comfortable rhythm they'd built over 8 years. Naomi signed between bites, explaining her project plan with the kind of enthusiasm most kids reserve for cartoons. Jerome watched her hands, her face, the way her whole body got involved when she was excited. She had Lena's eyes, dark and bright and impossibly expressive. He pushed the thought away and focused on his daughter. After breakfast, they walked 3 blocks to the bus stop. October mornings in Charlotte carried a chill that hadn't quite committed to cold. Jerome's breath misted faintly in the air. Naomi wore her backpack and a jacket she'd already outgrown at the sleeves. Mrs. Patterson was sweeping her porch across the street. She waved. Jerome waved back. The bus pulled up right on time. Yellow and loud and full of kids. Naomi turned before boarding and signed, "Love you. Love you too," Jerome signed back. She climbed the steps and disappeared into a seat near the back. Jerome waited until the bus pulled away before heading home. He showered, dressed in his work uniform, gray shirt with his name stitched over the pocket, dark pants, steel-toed boots, and drove to Lumina Health in his truck. The engine sputtered at red lights. He made a mental note to check the spark plugs over the weekend. Lumina Health occupied a gleaming glass tower on the edge of downtown. 8 stories of polished corporate ambition. Jerome parked in the employee lot behind the building and entered through the service door. The basement was his domain. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The air smelled like machine oil and recycled air. Boilers hummed. Pipes ran along the ceiling in orderly rows. Jerome clocked in, grabbed his toolbox, and got to work. There was always something that needed fixing. A valve leaking, a filter clogged, an HVAC unit making a noise it shouldn't. Jerome moved through the space with practiced efficiency, his hands remembering the work even when his mind drifted. Around 11, footsteps echoed on the stairs. Marcus, one of the younger maintenance guys, appeared with a clipboard. "Hey, Jerome, got a second?" Jerome wiped his hands on a rag. "What's up?" Marcus hesitated. "You ever think about applying for supervisor? Johnson's retiring next year. You've been here longer than anyone." Jerome shook his head. "I'm good where I am." "Yeah, but—" Marcus gestured vaguely toward the ceiling, toward the offices above them. "You could make more. Benefits. You've got a kid." "I know." Jerome's voice stayed even. "I'm good." Marcus nodded slowly, like he didn't quite believe it, but wasn't going to push. "All right, man. Just thought I'd ask." He left. Jerome returned to the boiler. The truth was simpler than Marcus would understand. Jerome didn't want to be seen, didn't want his name on paperwork, his face in meetings, his voice in decisions that mattered to people who wrote policies. He wanted to fix what was broken and go home to his daughter. That was enough. The rest of the day passed in the steady rhythm of labor. By 4, Jerome clocked out, picked up Naomi from the after-school program, and drove them home. Dinner was spaghetti. Naomi told him about her day. A disagreement with another student over who got to present first, a new book in the library, a substitute teacher who didn't know any sign language and kept trying to write everything on the board. "She means well," Jerome signed. "But yeah, that's frustrating." After dishes, they climbed the narrow stairs to the rooftop. Jerome had built the platform himself 2 years ago. Recycled pallets, sanded smooth and bolted together, a tarp for when it rained. 2 folding chairs and a small telescope Naomi had gotten for her 7th birthday. It wasn't much, but on clear nights it was theirs. The sky was darkening, stars beginning to appear. Naomi lay on her back, her small hands already tracing shapes in the air. "Orion," she signed. Jerome lay beside her. "Where?" She pointed, fingers spelling the stars one by one. Jerome followed her lead, naming them in return. Then she moved to Cassiopeia, then the Big Dipper. "Dad," she signed, turning her head to look at him. "How do you know all this?" Jerome's hands stilled for a moment. Then he signed, "Your mom taught me to see differently." Naomi's eyes widened slightly. She didn't ask many questions about Lena. Jerome had always wondered if that was because she didn't want to make him sad, or because the idea of a mother she'd never met felt too abstract to hold. "She liked stars?" Naomi signed. "She liked teaching people to see things they'd missed." Naomi considered this. Then she pointed up again. "What's Hawking radiation?" Jerome smiled. He fingerspelled the term slowly, then explained it in sign. The way black holes weren't entirely black, the way they emitted particles, the slow process of evaporation over impossible timescales. His hands moved with precision, the kind of fluency that didn't come from casual knowledge. Naomi watched, fascinated. When he finished, she signed, "You're really smart, Dad." "I pay attention," he signed back. They lay there until the chill became uncomfortable. Then Jerome helped Naomi down the stairs, made sure she brushed her teeth, tucked her into bed. Before turning off her lamp, she signed one more thing. Will you come to Deaf Culture Night next week? At school? Jerome's hands hesitated. Deaf Culture Night meant parents, teachers, students. It meant being in a room full of people using the language he'd sworn to keep private. It meant being seen. But Naomi's eyes were hopeful. Okay, he signed. I'll be there. She smiled, satisfied, and rolled over. Jerome turned off the light and stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching his daughter's breathing slow into sleep. He didn't know that in 2 days, everything he'd built to stay hidden would start to crack. The same evening, Jerome agreed to attend Deaf Culture Night. Lumina Health's corporate atrium was transformed into something unrecognizable. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. White tablecloths stretched across dozens of round tables. Men in tuxedos and women in evening gowns circulated with champagne glasses, their laughter echoing off marble floors. The annual Investor Gala. The night Lumina proved it was more than pharmaceuticals and profit margins. Jerome wasn't supposed to be there, but the HVAC system in the executive wing had other plans. He'd gotten the call at 6:30, just as he was putting Naomi to bed. Emergency repair. Temperature spiking in the conference rooms. The gala started at 7. He threw his tools in the truck and drove back to the building he'd left 3 hours earlier. Now he was in the mechanical room adjacent to the atrium, elbow deep in ductwork, while the party hummed overhead. He could hear the music through the ceiling. Classical, expensive, the kind that made silence feel like failure. Jerome tightened a valve and checked the thermostat. The temperature dropped 2 degrees. Good enough. He packed his tools, washed his hands in the utility sink, and headed for the service exit. The hallway was empty. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. His boots made no sound on the polished floor. Upstairs in the atrium, Claudia Remington stood at a microphone. She wore a navy dress that cost more than Jerome's monthly rent. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek twist. Her smile was camera-ready. Beside her, seated at the head table in a chair too big for her frame, sat her daughter. Ivy Remington was 12 years old. Thin, pale, dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. She wore a dress her mother had picked out and sat perfectly still while adults talked around her. "We're thrilled to announce," Claudia said into the microphone, her voice carrying across the room, "Lumina Health's new accessibility initiative. Because we believe that wellness innovation means meeting every patient where they are." Applause rippled through the crowd. Claudia gestured to Ivy. "My daughter has taught me so much about resilience, about overcoming challenges, about what's possible when we refuse to let obstacles define us." Ivy's hands stayed folded in her lap. Her face gave nothing away. No one was signing. No interpreter stood nearby. The words washing over Ivy might as well have been in another language. They were. A woman in a pearl necklace leaned across the table toward Ivy, lips moving rapidly. Ivy smiled politely, nodded. The woman turned back to her companion, satisfied. Ivy's chest began to tighten. The room felt too loud, too bright, too full of people who looked at her but never saw her. She focused on her breathing, in and out. But the air wouldn't come right. Her mother was still talking. Something about partnership and innovation and patience first. The words blurred together. Ivy stood. Her chair scraped against the floor. A few heads turned. Claudia paused mid-sentence, smile frozen. "Sweetheart, sit down." Ivy didn't sit. She walked toward the back of the room, past tables full of strangers, past waiters carrying trays, past the enormous glass windows that reflected her small shape, moving through a sea of people who weren't like her. She found the stairwell, the service stairs that led down to the basement. The door was heavy. She pulled it open and slipped inside. The stairwell was concrete and cold. The noise from the gala faded to a muffled hum. Ivy sat on the 4th step down and pressed her back against the wall. Her hands were shaking. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. She rocked forward slightly, then back. Forward. Back. Trying to make the tightness in her chest loosen. It didn't. She pulled her knees to her chest and started to cry. Jerome was halfway to the service exit when he heard it. Not a sound. He couldn't hear her crying. But something made him pause. A flicker of movement in his peripheral vision. The stairwell door, swinging slowly shut. He changed direction. The stairwell was dim. Jerome's eyes adjusted quickly. He saw her immediately, a girl in a formal dress, curled on the stairs, rocking. He recognized panic when he saw it. Jerome set down his toolbox and knelt 3 steps below her. Careful not to crowd her, he waited until she looked up. Then he signed, "Hey, breathing, in and out. You're okay." Ivy's eyes went wide. He was signing. This man, this stranger in a work uniform with grease still staining the cuffs, was signing to her. Jerome kept his hands slow and clear. "In, out, you're safe." Ivy's breath hitched. She tried to match his rhythm. In, out. Slowly, the tightness in her chest began to ease. Jerome sat on the step beside her, not too close, and waited. He didn't rush her, didn't ask questions, just sat. After a long moment, Ivy's hands moved, shaky, uncertain. Nobody listens. Jerome's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. Recognition, understanding. "I'm listening," he signed back. Ivy stared at him. Then hesitantly, she signed again. "I'm Ivy." "Nice to meet you, Ivy." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Her breathing had steadied. "Why do you know sign language?" "My daughter," Jerome signed. "She's deaf, 8 years old. Talks faster than I can keep up sometimes." Ivy almost smiled. "I'm learning. Online videos. My mom doesn't know." Jerome tilted his head slightly. "Why not?" Ivy's hands stilled. Then quietly, "She doesn't want to learn." Jerome said nothing, but the weight of that sentence hung between them. "What are you studying in school?" he signed, changing the subject with deliberate gentleness. Ivy's face brightened slightly. "Science. Black holes." "Black holes," Jerome repeated, finger spelling the words with precision. "What about them?" "Hawking radiation," Ivy signed, the term coming out choppy, unsure. Jerome's hands moved smoothly, correcting her finger spelling, then expanding. He explained the concept, the way black holes emitted particles, the slow evaporation, the mathematics behind something invisible becoming visible. Ivy watched, fascinated. Her hands began to move faster, asking questions, offering observations. Jerome answered each one with the same patient clarity, and then Ivy laughed. It was a small sound, barely audible, but it was real. For the first time in months, someone was speaking her language. Not because they had to, because they could. The stairwell door above them opened with a sharp, metallic click. Claudia Remington stood at the top of the stairs. Her face was flushed. Her perfectly styled hair had come slightly loose. She'd been searching. Her eyes landed on Ivy, then on Jerome, a black man in work clothes, alone with her daughter, in a stairwell. Claudia's expression shifted from relief to something colder, harder. "Ivy, come here, now." Ivy stood quickly, signing toward her mother. "He was helping." Claudia didn't look at her hands. "I said now." Jerome rose to his feet slowly. He kept his hands visible, his voice quiet. "She was upset. I was just... Step away from my daughter." Jerome took 1 step back. His toolbox sat on the landing below. Claudia descended 2 stairs, her heels clicking sharply. She looked at Jerome like he was something she needed to remove. "What's your name?" "Jerome Hayes. Maintenance." "What were you doing with her?" "She was having a panic attack. I helped her breathe." Ivy signed desperately at her mother's side. Her hands moved in rapid, frantic gestures. Jerome could read every word. "He speaks sign language. He was nice. He helped me." Claudia didn't look down. "Security!" Her voice cracked through the stairwell like a whip. Jerome didn't move, didn't argue. He'd learned a long time ago how these moments went. How men who looked like him were seen. How explanations didn't matter when fear had already written the story. Ivy was still signing, still trying to be heard, but her mother had already turned away. Heavy footsteps echoed down the stairwell. 2 security guards appeared at the landing above, radios crackling at their hips. "Ma'am, what's the situation?" Claudia pointed at Jerome. Her hands shook slightly. "This man was alone with my daughter. I want him removed from the building immediately." Ivy's hands flew into motion, signing frantically at her mother's side. Her face was red, tears still wet on her cheeks. "He helped me." He helped me. Claudia didn't look down. Her eyes stayed fixed on Jerome. The first guard descended the stairs. Sir, we need you to come with us. Jerome nodded once. He picked up his toolbox carefully, keeping his movements slow and visible. No sudden gestures, no arguments. He'd learned this lesson young, how quickly a situation could turn, how little it took for someone to decide you were a threat. Wait, Ivy signed. Please, tell them. But her hands were invisible to everyone except Jerome. The second guard took Jerome's arm. Not rough, not gentle. Just firm enough to make it clear this wasn't a request. This way. They led him up the stairs past Claudia, past Ivy. Jerome kept his eyes forward, his jaw tight. The toolbox felt heavier than it should. Behind him, Ivy tried to pull away from her mother. Her silent sobs became audible. Sharp, desperate gasps for air. Claudia gripped her daughter's wrist. We're going back to the party. Now. At the top of the stairs, the atrium opened before them like a stage. The gala was still in full swing. Champagne glasses, string quartet, laughter bouncing off marble. The security guards walked Jerome through the crowd. Conversations paused. Heads turned. A woman in a silver gown whispered to her companion. A man in a tuxedo stepped aside, creating space Jerome hadn't asked for. The walk to the service exit felt endless. Every eye in the room tracked his path. Every whisper carried judgment he couldn't quite hear, but understood completely. Jerome kept his chin level, his shoulders square. If they were going to watch him leave, he'd give them nothing to add to whatever story Claudia was already writing. The cool night air hit him like a physical relief. One of the guards handed him a business card. You'll need to speak with HR tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. Jerome took the card. Am I being charged with something? That's not our call. Just be there at 8. They left him standing in the employee parking lot, his truck waiting under a flickering streetlight. Jerome set his toolbox in the bed and climbed into the cab. The engine turned over on the second try. He didn't drive away immediately. He sat there, hands on the wheel, watching the building's glass facade reflect the city lights. Inside, Ivy was being pulled back into a world where no one spoke her language, and Jerome had broken his one rule: stay invisible. The next morning, Jerome arrived at Lumina Health at 7:45. The HR office was on the third floor, tucked behind a frosted glass door labeled Human Resources in clean corporate letters. The receptionist barely looked up. Mr. Hayes? Yes. Director Kemp will see you now. The office was small, beige walls, a single window overlooking the parking lot. Director Kemp sat behind a desk covered in manila folders and a computer monitor angled away from view. She was in her 40s, black like Jerome, wearing a gray pantsuit that matched the walls. Her expression gave nothing away. Mr. Hayes, please sit. Jerome sat. Director Kemp opened a folder. I'll make this brief. As of this morning, your employment with Lumina Health is terminated, effective immediately. Jerome's hands rested on his knees. Can I ask why? Inappropriate contact with an executive family member, security protocol violation. The incident was witnessed by multiple investors and reported directly by Mrs. Remington. Did anyone speak to her daughter? Director Kemp's pen paused over a form. She looked up. Excuse me? The girl, Ivy, did anyone ask what happened from her perspective? That's not relevant to this decision. Jerome's voice stayed even, quiet. She was having a panic attack. I helped her calm down, that's all. Mrs. Remington's account differs. Director Kemp slid a paper across the desk. You'll need to sign this. It confirms receipt of termination and waives your right to appeal. Jerome read it slowly. The language was careful, clinical. It made him sound like a liability that had been efficiently managed. He didn't sign it. I'd like to speak with someone above you. Director Kemp's expression hardened slightly. That won't change the outcome. Mrs. Remington is the CEO. Her word is final in matters concerning the executive family safety. Jerome set the paper back on the desk. Then I won't sign. You'll forfeit your final paycheck. I know. They sat in silence for a moment. Director Kemp's fingers drummed once against the folder, then stopped. Clean out your locker by 9. Security will escort you from the building. Jerome stood. Did you believe her when she told you what happened? Director Kemp looked at him for a long moment. Something passed behind her eyes. Recognition, maybe? Or resignation? She'd sat in this chair before, made these decisions before. It doesn't matter what I believe, Mr. Hayes. Jerome nodded slowly. He turned and left the office without another word. The locker room in the basement was empty. Jerome's locker was number 17, third row from the door. He spun the combination lock and pulled it open. There wasn't much inside. A spare uniform shirt, a water bottle, a photo of Naomi taped to the inside of the door, her first day of school 2 years ago, grinning with her backpack almost bigger than she was. Jerome unstuck the photo carefully and slipped it into his wallet. Marcus appeared in the doorway, still in his work uniform. Jerome? Man, what's going on? I heard... I'm done, Jerome said quietly. Done? What do you mean, done? Jerome pulled the spare shirt from the locker and folded it. They let me go. For what? Jerome closed the locker. The metal door clicked shut with finality. Doesn't matter. Marcus stepped closer. That's it? You're not going to fight this? No. Why not? Jerome looked at him. Marcus was 26. Optimistic. Still believed the system bent toward fairness if you just explained yourself clearly enough. Because I know how this goes, Jerome said. He walked past Marcus, through the basement hallway one last time, up the stairs to the service exit. The security guard from last night was waiting. Different shift, same job. Mr. Hayes, I know the way out. The guard followed him anyway. Procedure. Jerome reached his truck, loaded the spare shirt into the passenger seat, and climbed behind the wheel. The guard stood 10 feet away, arms crossed, watching to make sure he left. Jerome started the engine. He pulled out of the parking lot slowly, signaling at every turn, obeying every posted limit. In his rearview mirror, Lumina Health's glass tower grew smaller. He drove toward home, rehearsing what he'd say to Naomi, how he'd explain losing the job he'd held for 3 years, how he'd frame it so she wouldn't worry, wouldn't see the tightness in his chest that came from knowing rent was due in 2 weeks and the truck needed new tires and her school fees were coming up. But mostly, Jerome thought about the look on Ivy's face when her mother found them in the stairwell, the way relief had turned to terror in the space of a breath. Jerome picked Naomi up from school at 3:15. She climbed into the truck with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, braids still neat from the morning. How was your day? He signed after she buckled in. Good. We learned about gravity. Her hands moved fast, excited. Did you fix a lot of things at work? Jerome's hands paused on the steering wheel. He pulled out of the parking lot before answering. I need to tell you something. Naomi's face shifted. She read him too well. They drove home in silence. Inside the duplex, Jerome made her a snack, apple slices and peanut butter, and sat across from her at the small kitchen table. I don't work at Lumina anymore, he signed. Naomi's eyes went wide. Why not? They let me go. But you're really good at fixing things. Jerome's chest tightened. I know. Sometimes it's not about that. Did you do something wrong? No. Then why? Jerome couldn't explain it in a way that wouldn't frighten her. Couldn't tell her about stairwells and accusations, and the way some people saw danger where there was only kindness. Sometimes adults make decisions that don't make sense, he signed. But we'll be okay, I promise. Naomi studied his face. She was 8, but she knew when he was holding something back. Are we in trouble? With money? No, I'll find another job. She nodded slowly, then went back to her apple slices. But the brightness from earlier was gone. That night, after Naomi fell asleep, Jerome sat on the floor of his bedroom closet. The box was pushed to the back corner, behind winter coats and old shoes. Cardboard taped shut, unmarked. He pulled it out and set it in his lap. The tape peeled away easily, too easily, like it had been waiting. Inside, photos, awards, newspaper clippings, a leather folder containing printed testimony with the Senate seal embossed on the cover. Jerome lifted the folder carefully. The pages inside were worn at the edges from handling. 12 years old but still crisp. Testimony of Jerome Emanuel Hayes, Founding Director, National Coalition for Deaf Advocacy. Presented before the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. March 14, 2009. He didn't open it. He knew what it said. He'd written every word. Beneath the folder, photographs. One showed Jerome at a podium, younger, clean-shaven, wearing a suit he hadn't put on in over a decade. Microphones clustered in front of him, senators visible in the background. Another showed him with Lena. Jerome's breath caught. She was signing something to the camera, her hands mid-motion, her face lit with the kind of joy that didn't need sound. 8 months pregnant, radiant, alive. They'd taken that photo 3 weeks before she died. Jerome set it down carefully and closed his eyes. Washington, D.C., 12 years ago. The hearing room had been cold despite the crowd. Jerome sat at the witness table, a microphone in front of him, an interpreter to his left, signing everything he said for the deaf advocates seated in the gallery. Senator Morrison leaned forward. Mr. Hayes, you've stated that communication failures in healthcare settings disproportionately harm deaf patients. Can you provide specific examples? Jerome didn't hesitate. Last year, a deaf woman in Oregon was misdiagnosed with anxiety when she was actually having a stroke. The hospital didn't provide an interpreter. She died 3 days later. The room went quiet. 2 months ago, Jerome continued, a deaf man in Florida was given the wrong medication because the pharmacist wrote instructions he couldn't read and no one explained them in his language. He's still in the ICU. He paused. Let the weight settle. These aren't isolated incidents, Senator. They're systemic failures, and they're preventable. Senator Morrison nodded. What does your organization propose? Mandatory ASL interpreter access in all medical settings, federal funding for training, certification standards, accountability when institutions fail to provide it. And you believe this is achievable? Jerome leaned closer to the microphone. I believe we can't afford not to achieve it. The gallery erupted in applause, deaf hands waving in the air, the visual equivalent of cheering. After the hearing, Lena met him in the hallway. Her hands moved before he could even speak. You were perfect. I was angry. Good, they need to see that. She pulled him into a hug, her belly pressing between them. Jerome felt the baby kick. She's proud of you too, Lena signed when they pulled apart. She? Lena smiled. I have a feeling. That was 3 weeks before the hospital failed her. 3 weeks before communication broke down between a deaf patient in labor and a hearing medical team who didn't understand that when she signed frantically that something was wrong. She wasn't panicking. She was dying. Jerome opened his eyes. The duplex was silent around him. He put the photo back in the box, closed the lid, taped it shut. Then he sat there on the closet floor, staring at nothing, until dawn light crept through the bedroom window. Across town, in a house 3 times the size of Jerome's duplex, Ivy Remington sat at the dinner table. Her plate was untouched. Her mother sat across from her, phone in hand, scrolling through emails. Claudia looked up. Her lips moved. Ivy didn't try to read them. She kept her eyes on her plate. Claudia set down her phone. Her lips moved again, slower this time, exaggerated. Ivy recognized the shape of her own name. She still didn't respond. Claudia's jaw tightened. She stood, walked around the table, and tapped Ivy's shoulder. When Ivy looked up, Claudia was signing, slow, clumsy, clearly pulled from a basic online tutorial. Why are you not eating? Ivy's hand stayed in her lap. Claudia tried again. Talk to me. Ivy stood. She walked past her mother up the stairs to her room and closed the door. An hour later, Claudia found the note taped to her home office door. White paper, black marker, 1 sentence in Ivy's careful handwriting. You fired the only person who listened. Claudia stared at it, read it twice, then ripped it down. She found Ivy in her room, sitting on the bed with her arms crossed. What is this? Claudia held up the note. Ivy's hands didn't move. Answer me. Nothing. Claudia's control cracked. You're grounded. No phone, no laptop, and you're going to sit with me at dinner every night until you decide to act like part of this family. Ivy's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes went cold. Claudia left, taking Ivy's laptop from the desk on her way out. Over the next week, Ivy stopped coming to dinner entirely. She ate cereal in her room, did her homework in silence, walked past her mother in the hallway like she was furniture. Claudia tried everything, bargaining, threats, signing clumsy apologies she'd practiced in the mirror. Ivy stayed silent. On the 7th day, Claudia sat in her office after midnight, staring at her calendar. The Healthcare Accessibility Summit was 2 weeks away, live-streamed, high profile. A chance to prove Lumina Health cared about patients. A chance to prove she cared. She picked up her phone and called her assistant. I need you to hire a professional ASL interpreter for the summit, Claudia said. Make sure they're certified. Make sure they're visible. I want this done right. She hung up and looked at the photo on her desk. Ivy at age 7, before the cancer, before the deafness, before everything became so complicated. Claudia didn't know how to reach her daughter anymore, but she knew how to put on a show. 2 weeks after Claudia hired the interpreter, Lumina Health's conference center buzzed with preparation. The event coordinator stood in the main hall with a tablet, checking items off a list. Lighting, sound system, camera angles for the live stream, seating for 300, press credentials for 24 outlets. The Healthcare Accessibility Summit was 48 hours away. In her office on the 8th floor, Claudia reviewed her keynote speech for the 10th time. The title sat at the top of the page in bold letters. Listening to Patients. She'd written it herself, polished every word, rehearsed the pauses, the emphatic moments, the places where she'd gesture toward Ivy sitting beside her. Her assistant knocked and entered without waiting. Interpreter confirmed. Camera crew arrives tomorrow at 6 a.m. Press list finalized. And Ivy's dress? Picked up from the tailor this morning. Claudia nodded. Good. This needs to be perfect. The assistant hesitated. She knows she's attending, right? She'll be there. Has she said anything about it? Claudia's jaw tightened. Ivy hadn't said anything about anything in 2 weeks, but she'd be at the summit. Claudia would make sure of it. That's all, Claudia said. The assistant left. Claudia returned to her speech. The day before the summit, Ivy sat in her room doing homework. Algebra. She worked through the problems mechanically, her pencil moving across the page in silence. Downstairs, Claudia's phone rang. Mrs. Remington, this is David Chen, your ASL interpreter for tomorrow. Yes, we're all set for 7 a.m. There was a pause. That's why I'm calling. I'm afraid I have to cancel. Family emergency. My father's in the hospital. Claudia's grip on the phone tightened. When did this happen? An hour ago. Can you recommend a replacement? I've already called every certified interpreter in Charlotte. Everyone's booked. It's short notice. I understand that, but this event is being live streamed. I'm sorry, Mrs. Remington. I wish I could help. The line went dead. Claudia stared at her phone. Then she called her event coordinator. The interpreter canceled. A sharp intake of breath on the other end. What do we do? Find another one. Mrs. Remington, it's 4 p.m., the day before a major event. Every professional in the region is. Then call the next region. Call Atlanta. Call D.C. I'll try. Claudia hung up and paced her office. Outside her window, Charlotte's skyline stretched toward a gray afternoon sky. 20 minutes later, the coordinator called back. No one's available. I've tried 8 agencies. Claudia stopped pacing. Then we proceed without one. But the whole point of the summit is, I'm aware of the point. Claudia's voice sharpened. Ivy will sit on stage. She'll be visible. That's visual representation. That's what matters. Are you sure? I'm sure. Confirm everything else. I'll handle the optics. She ended the call and looked at the framed photo on her desk. Ivy at 7, smiling, before everything got complicated. Claudia picked up the photo, studied it for a moment, then set it face down. Upstairs, Ivy sat at her desk. Her bedroom door was cracked open. She'd heard her mother's voice through the floor vent, the sharp tone that meant something had gone wrong. She opened her journal and wrote one sentence in careful letters. I'm a prop. Then she closed the journal and returned to her algebra. Across town, Jerome Hayes stood on Mrs. Patterson's front porch, replacing a rotted board. The wood was soft with water damage, easy to pry away. He measured a new plank, cut it to size, and fitted it into place. The work was steady. He'd found 3 regular clients in 2 weeks, enough to cover rent and groceries, enough to keep moving forward. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled off his work gloves and answered. Mr. Hayes, this is Miss Rivera, Naomi's teacher. Is everything okay? Oh yes, she's fine. I'm actually calling about something else. Miss. Rivera's voice was warm, slightly hesitant. I don't know if you've heard, but Lumina Health is hosting a healthcare accessibility summit tomorrow. It's a big event, live streamed. There'll be deaf attendees, Panel discussions about patient communication? Jerome set down his hammer. Okay. I work part-time at Lumina's community outreach program. I thought it might be meaningful for Naomi to see deaf representation in a professional setting. And for you too, maybe. Jerome looked at the half-finished porch. I appreciate that, Miss Rivera, but I don't think... It's free admission, starts at 9. There's even a kids section with activities in ASL. I'm not sure that's... Just think about it, Miss Rivera said gently. Representation matters, especially for kids like Naomi. Jerome's throat tightened. I'll think about it. Great. I hope to see you there. She hung up. Jerome stood on the porch, phone in hand, staring at nothing. Lumina Health. The building he'd been escorted out of 2 weeks ago. The place that had decided he was a threat instead of a person. He wasn't going back. That evening, Jerome picked Naomi up from school. She climbed into the truck with her backpack and immediately started signing. Ms. Rivera told me about the summit tomorrow. Jerome started the engine. She told me too. Can we go? I don't think so, baby. Why not? Jerome merged into traffic. How did he explain this? How did he tell his 8-year-old daughter that the world wasn't always fair, that doors closed for reasons that had nothing to do with what you deserved? It's complicated, he signed at the next red light. Is it because you used to work there? Jerome's hands stilled. How do you know that? Miss Rivera mentioned it. She said you don't work there anymore, but the summit's for everyone. The light turned green. Jerome drove in silence for a block. Please, Dad, Naomi signed when he glanced over. I've never seen anything like that, a whole event in my language. Her face was so hopeful, so bright with possibility. Jerome thought about the box in his closet, the testimony, the work he'd walked away from, the promise he'd made to stay invisible. But Naomi was looking at him like he could give her the world. Okay, he signed. We'll go. Naomi's face lit up. She bounced in her seat, hands flying with excitement. Really? Really? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Jerome managed to smile, but his grip on the steering wheel stayed tight all the way home. He didn't know that in less than 24 hours, he'd be standing in front of that same building again. Not as an employee, not as someone escorted out by security, as the only person in a room full of witnesses who could translate a breaking girl's truth. The conference hall at Lumina Health seated 300 people. Every chair was filled. Jerome and Naomi sat near the back, 3 rows from the exit. The lights were bright overhead, cameras mounted on tripods at strategic angles. A banner behind the stage read, Healthcare Accessibility Summit, in clean corporate letters. Naomi signed to Jerome, her hands quick with excitement. There are so many deaf people here. Jerome nodded. Around them, dozens of attendees were signing to each other. Some wore shirts with Deaf Pride slogans. Others held programs printed in both English and ASL glosses. This was what Miss Rivera had promised. Representation, community, visibility. But Jerome's attention kept drifting to the stage. At 9 o'clock sharp, the lights dimmed. A woman in a Lumina Health blazer stepped to the microphone. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our inaugural Healthcare Accessibility Summit. We're live streaming to thousands of viewers across the country who believe, as we do, that every patient deserves to be heard. Polite applause. The deaf attendees around Jerome waved their hands in the air. Visual applause. It's my honor to introduce our CEO, Claudia Remington. More applause. The live stream cameras swiveled toward the stage. Claudia walked out in a charcoal suit, her hair perfectly styled, her smile camera-ready. Beside her walked a thin girl in a pale blue dress, 12 years old, dark circles under her eyes despite the makeup someone had tried to cover them with. Jerome's breath caught. Ivy. She moved like she was being led to an execution. Her shoulders hunched. Her hands stayed at her sides. She sat in the chair beside the podium, not at it, beside it, while her mother took center stage. Naomi noticed too. Her hands moved in Jerome's peripheral vision. Dad, that's the girl. From before. Jerome nodded once. His jaw tightened. Claudia began her speech. Her voice carried through the speakers with practiced confidence. Thank you all for being here. Today we're talking about something close to my heart. Patient-centered care. Because at Lumina Health, we believe that listening to our patients isn't just good medicine, it's good humanity. In the audience, a deaf woman in the third row leaned toward her companion and signed something. Jerome caught the gesture. "Where's the interpreter?" The companion shrugged. Signed back. "I don't know." Claudia continued. "My daughter Ivy has taught me so much about resilience, about what it means to overcome challenges, about listening to voices that matter." Ivy sat perfectly still. Her face gave nothing away, but her hands, resting in her lap, had started to tremble. "We're committed," Claudia said, "to ensuring that every patient who walks through our doors feels seen, heard, and valued. That's why we're launching a comprehensive accessibility initiative." More deaf attendees were signing now, confusion rippling through the rows. "This is supposed to be accessible. Where's the ASL? Is this a joke?" The live stream chat, visible on monitors flanking the stage, filled with similar comments. "Where's the interpreter? This is performative BS hashtag, where is ASL?" Claudia didn't see any of it. She was reading from her script, hitting her marks, performing for the cameras. Because we understand that communication is healthcare, and healthcare is a human right. Ivy's hands clenched into fists. Her breathing had changed, shallow, rapid. Jerome recognized the pattern. He'd seen it 2 weeks ago in a stairwell. Panic. Ivy stood. Claudia's smile flickered. She reached for Ivy's arm. "Sweetheart, sit down." Ivy pulled away. Claudia's voice dropped, still audible through the microphone. "Ivy, not now." But Ivy wasn't looking at her mother. She was looking at the camera, at the red light that meant thousands of people were watching. Her hands started to move. Slow at first, shaky, then clearer. "My name is Ivy." The deaf attendees in the audience leaned forward. "My mother doesn't understand me." Claudia's face went pale. "Ivy, I feel invisible." The room had gone completely quiet. Even the hearing attendees who didn't know ASL could tell something was happening. Something unscripted. Something real. Nobody listens. Ivy's hands trembled but didn't stop. Her face crumpled. Tears began streaming down her cheeks. Claudia stood frozen at the podium. The carefully constructed performance shattering in real time. The live stream chat exploded. "Oh my God, she's signing her truth. This is heartbreaking. Where is the interpreter for this child? Someone help her." In the back row, Naomi's small hand grabbed Jerome's sleeve. She signed urgently, her eyes wide. "Dad, she needs help, please." Jerome looked at his daughter. 8 years old. Naomi had never asked him for much. She'd learned early that the world wasn't built for her, that she had to adapt, compromise, make herself small. But right now, she wasn't asking for herself. She was asking for another girl who couldn't breathe in a room full of people who couldn't hear her. Jerome looked back at the stage, at Ivy, breaking apart on camera, at Claudia, paralyzed by the collapse of her own facade, at the empty space where an interpreter should have been standing. He thought about Lena, about the promise he'd made to stay invisible, about the box in his closet and the life he'd buried. Then he thought about a stairwell, a girl crying, 5 minutes of conversation that had cost him everything. Jerome stood up. Jerome walked down the center aisle. His work boots made no sound on the carpeted floor. 300 people turned to watch. The cameras swiveled to follow him. Claudia's eyes locked on his face. Recognition hit her like cold water. "Sir," she said into the microphone. "Sir, sit down." Jerome didn't sit. He reached the front of the room and stepped to the side of the stage. Not on it, just beside it. Close enough for Ivy to see his hands. He looked at the girl, 12 years old, tears streaming down her face, shaking. His hands moved. Slow, clear, deliberate. "I'm here. You're safe. Tell them." Ivy's breath hitched. She stared at him. Her eyes went wide with recognition. The man from the stairwell, the one who'd listened, the one her mother had destroyed, and he'd come back. Ivy's hands began to move again, not shaky this time, steadier, like someone had just thrown her a lifeline. Jerome's voice filled the hall. Deep, quiet, steady. "I don't want to be here," he said, interpreting Ivy's signs into spoken English. "My mom makes me come to these things. She says I'm part of the story, the brave daughter who overcame adversity. The room had gone completely silent. Every eye on Jerome. Every camera recording. "But I'm not brave," Jerome continued, his hands moving in perfect sync with Ivy's. "I'm just lonely." Ivy's signing grew faster, more fluid. 12 years of words trapped inside finally pouring out. "She won't learn my language. She says I need to function in the real world. But what world? I can't function in hers. And she won't even try to enter mine." Jerome's voice never wavered. He didn't edit, didn't soften, just translated exactly what Ivy said. "I've been learning sign language by myself, online videos, because no one else would teach me. And when I found someone who could actually talk to me, really talk to me, she fired him." Claudia's face had gone white. She reached for the microphone like she could stop this, take back control, but Ivy kept signing. "I'm not a recovery story. I'm just a kid who wants her mom to see her." Jerome's hands moved with absolute fluency. His face showed nothing but focus. Every sign perfect. Every word weighted exactly as Ivy intended. The deaf attendees in the audience sat forward in their seats. Some were crying. Others had their hands pressed to their chests. The live stream chat had shifted. The angry complaints replaced by something else. "Who is that guy? Wait, those hands, that precision, is that? No, it can't be." In the fifth row, a woman stood. She was in her 40s, with short dark hair and warm brown skin. She signed and spoke simultaneously, her voice carrying through the stunned silence. "That's Jerome Hayes." The name landed like a stone in still water. A board member in the front row turned to his colleague. "Jerome Hayes?" The woman, Dr. Kira Moss, signed again, her hands sharp with emphasis, her voice ringing clear. "That's Jerome Emmanuel Hayes. He founded the National Coalition for Deaf Advocacy. He testified before Congress. He wrote the brief that reformed medical interpretation standards across the country." She paused, looked directly at Claudia. "Where has he been?" The press started recording. Phones came out. Camera flashes popped like small explosions. A board member's face went pale. He leaned toward the person beside him and whispered something urgent. Jerome didn't stop. His hands kept moving. Ivy kept signing. The story kept unfolding. "I just want to be heard," Ivy signed. "Not as inspiration, not as a prop, just as me." Jerome's voice carried her words to every corner of the room. "I want my mother to learn my language, not because she has to, because she wants to know me." Claudia stood at the podium, frozen. Her carefully constructed speech abandoned on the lectern. Her accessibility initiative reduced to ash. Everything she'd built to prove she cared, collapsing in real time. The man she'd fired. The man she'd accused. The man she'd had escorted out by security. He wasn't a janitor. He was a legend. And her daughter had been screaming for help in a language Claudia had refused to learn. Ivy's hands slowed. The tears on her face had stopped falling. She looked at Jerome, really looked at him, and her hands formed 3 more signs. "Thank you for listening." Then she smiled. It started small, just the corners of her mouth lifting, then wider. The same smile Jerome had seen in a stairwell 3 weeks ago. The smile of a girl who'd finally been seen. But this time, it wasn't hidden in a basement. It was on camera, live streamed to thousands of people, witnessed by board members and press and deaf advocates who'd spent decades fighting for exactly this. For children to have interpreters, for families to learn sign language, for accessibility to mean more than a checkbox on a corporate initiative. The smile was proof of connection, of language, of what happens when someone chooses to listen. The live stream chat exploded. "She's smiling. Oh my God, she's actually smiling. This is what accessibility looks like. Hashtag Ivy deserves ASL." In the back row, Naomi watched her father. Her hands moved in small, proud signs. "That's my dad." And for the first time in 12 years, Jerome Hayes stood in the light instead of the shadows, using the gift he'd tried to bury, speaking for someone who had no voice in a room that had refused to listen. The live stream ended. The cameras powered down, and chaos poured into the space where control had been. Press descended on Jerome like water through a broken dam. Microphones thrust forward. Questions shouted over each other. "Mr. Hayes, how long have you been in Charlotte? Did you know Mrs. Remington before today? Are you planning legal action?" Jerome raised one hand. The gesture was small but absolute. The question stopped. No comment. He turned away from the reporters and knelt beside Naomi. His daughter's eyes were wide, overwhelmed by the noise and movement. Jerome's hands moved in calm, deliberate signs. Time to go. But Dad, now! A woman approached from the side, 40-something, warm brown skin, signing as she spoke. Dr. Kira Moss. Her eyes were bright with something Jerome hadn't seen in years. Hope. Jerome, it's been 12 years. Kira, are you coming back? To the work? Jerome stood slowly. He looked at her, then at the stage where Ivy still stood, then back at Naomi. I don't know. Kira nodded. She pressed a business card into his hand. When you decide, call me. Jerome pocketed the card and took Naomi's hand. They moved toward the exit. Behind them, Ivy broke away from her mother's assistant and ran after them. Wait! Jerome stopped, turned. Ivy's hands moved fast, desperate. Thank you. Please don't leave. Jerome's expression softened. He signed back, You're going to be okay. How do you know? Because you found your voice. That's the hardest part. Claudia's assistant caught up, took Ivy's arm. Come on, sweetheart. Your mother needs you. Ivy was pulled away. She looked back at Jerome until the crowd swallowed her. Jerome and Naomi left through the side door. Backstage, in a windowless conference room, the board of directors convened an emergency meeting. 6 people seated around a table. Claudia stood at the head, her spine straight, her hands gripping the chair back. Richard Chen, the board's longest-serving member, spoke first. His voice was measured but sharp. Walk us through this, Claudia. You fired Jerome Hayes. I didn't know who he was. That's not an answer. You fired a maintenance worker for helping your daughter during a medical emergency. Then we discover he's not just anyone. He's Jerome Emmanuel Hayes, the man who wrote the accessibility framework we're implementing, the man who testified before Congress on the exact policies we're claiming to champion. Claudia's jaw tightened. He was unidentified, no credentials visible. I was protecting my daughter. Another board member, Angela Morris, leaned forward. From what exactly? From a stranger. A stranger who was helping her breathe. I didn't know that at the time. Richard cut in. Your daughter just told 15,000 live stream viewers that you don't listen to her. That's the story now. Not our accessibility initiative, not our patient-centered care. Your daughter breaking down on camera, saying she feels invisible. Claudia's knuckles went white against the chair. I can fix this. How? I'll issue a statement. We'll emphasize the miscommunication. I'll apologize to Mr. Hayes privately. We'll offer him his job back. You think that's the problem? Angela's voice rose slightly. The problem isn't that you fired him. The problem is everything that led to that moment. The fact that you brought your deaf daughter to an accessibility summit with no interpreter. The fact that she's been learning sign language in secret because you won't. The fact that when she tried to tell you someone helped her, you didn't listen. Silence filled the room like water rising. Richard stood. We're calling a vote, tomorrow morning, on your future with this company. Claudia's face went pale. Richard, this isn't negotiable, Claudia. The board has a fiduciary duty. Your judgment is compromised, your leadership is compromised, and as of 2 hours ago, our stock price started dropping. He left. The others followed, one by one, until Claudia stood alone in the empty conference room, still gripping the chair. 1 hour later, Claudia sat in her office, the corner office, 8th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Charlotte. Her legal team sat across from her, 2 lawyers in expensive suits. Can he sue? Claudia asked. For wrongful termination and defamation? Absolutely, the first lawyer said. You accused him of misconduct in front of witnesses. You had him escorted out by security. Then your daughter publicly contradicted your account on a live stream watched by thousands. What's our exposure? 7 figures, possibly 8 if he goes for emotional distress and reputational damage. Claudia closed her eyes. Recommendations? The second lawyer spoke. Settle, quickly, before he lawyers up. And the PR situation? A woman from the PR firm joined the conversation via speakerphone. The video's gone viral. Hashtag Ivy deserves ASL is trending nationally. We're seeing think pieces from deaf advocates, parenting blogs, disability rights organizations. The story isn't Lumina Health's accessibility initiative anymore. It's about a CEO who won't learn her own daughter's language. Can we control the narrative? No. The PR woman's voice was blunt. Not this time. Claudia opened her eyes. Then what do we do? You step back, let the board handle it, and you learn sign language. That's not a PR strategy. It's the only strategy that matters. The call ended. The lawyers left. Claudia sat alone in her office as the sky outside turned orange with sunset. A knock at the door. Her assistant's voice. Mrs. Remington, Ivy is still in the waiting area. She says she's not leaving until you talk to her. Claudia's hands clenched into fists. Tell her to go home. She won't. She wrote you another note. The assistant entered and placed a piece of paper on Claudia's desk, then left. Claudia looked at the note. Same handwriting, same careful letters. I'm not leaving until you promise to learn my language. Claudia crumpled the note, smoothed it out, read it again. Outside her office, through the glass wall, she could see Ivy sitting in a chair, arms crossed, face set with determination, 12 years old, and more certain of herself than Claudia had been in a decade. Claudia's laptop sat on her desk. She opened it, typed into the search bar, Jerome Emmanuel Hayes testimony. The results loaded. Videos, articles, congressional records. She clicked the first video. A hearing room. 2009. A younger Jerome at a witness table, clean-shaven, suit and tie, speaking with quiet authority about healthcare communication failures and deaf patients dying because no one could understand them. The camera panned to the gallery. A deaf woman sat in the front row, 8 months pregnant, signing encouragement to Jerome, her face radiant with pride. The video ended. Claudia sat in the dark office, staring at the screen. The man she'd destroyed, the man she'd accused, the man she'd fired. He'd been fighting for her daughter's community years before Ivy was even born, and Claudia had learned nothing. 3 months later, winter came to Charlotte. Jerome sat in his truck outside Lumina Health, engine idling, heat running low. He'd been here twice a week since October. Consultant work, remote mostly, but Dr. Kira Moss insisted on occasional in-person meetings to rebuild the patient communication infrastructure properly. The building looked the same, glass and steel, 8 stories, but the basement where he'd once fixed boilers now had a different supervisor. The executive wing had a different CEO, and Jerome Hayes walked through the front door instead of the service entrance. Inside, the lobby was warm. A receptionist he didn't recognize smiled at him. Mr. Hayes, Dr. Moss is expecting you. He took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Conference room C. Kira was already there, reviewing documents spread across the table. She looked up and signed as she spoke. Good morning. Morning. We're implementing the interpreter network next week. I wanted your eyes on the final protocol. Jerome sat, read through the pages. Medical interpretation standards, backup systems, staff training requirements, language access coordinators in every department. It was the framework he'd written 12 years ago, updated, expanded, actually being put into practice. It's good, he said quietly. Because of you. Jerome shook his head. Because of Ivy. Kira smiled. Both. They worked for an hour. Then Jerome drove home, changed into work clothes, and went to fix Mrs. Patterson's leaking sink. The consulting paid well, but his hands still needed to build things. That evening, there was a deaf community event at the Cultural Center on East Boulevard. Naomi had been talking about it all week, a celebration of deaf artists, performers, storytellers. Jerome and Naomi arrived early. The center was alive with movement, hands flying in conversation, laughter that needed no sound, children running between tables set with food. Naomi spotted friends from school and ran to join them. Jerome stayed near the entrance, watching. Then he saw them. Ivy walked in with a man in his 40s, her father graying at the temples, signing fluently with his daughter about something that made her laugh. Ivy looked different, lighter. Her eyes no longer carried the weight they had 3 months ago. Behind them, keeping distance, came Claudia. She looked smaller somehow. No designer suit, Just jeans and a simple sweater. Her hair pulled back. No makeup. She walked like someone still learning the terrain. Ivy didn't look back at her mother. She went straight to a group of deaf teenagers and melted into their conversation like water into water. Claudia stood alone near the refreshment table. Jerome watched her scan the room, watched her hands move slightly practicing. She was nervous. After 10 minutes, Ivy's father nudged his daughter gently, said something. Ivy's expression tightened, but she nodded. She walked over to her mother. Claudia's hands moved. Slow, careful. The signs were basic, but clear. I'm sorry, I'm learning. Ivy stood very still. Her face gave nothing away. Then she signed back. I know. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just acknowledgement. Ivy didn't smile, but she nodded once before returning to her friends. Claudia stood there, hands at her sides, breathing like she'd just climbed a mountain. Jerome turned away. It wasn't his story anymore. An hour later, Jerome and Naomi left the center and drove to Oakwood Cemetery. The sun was setting, casting long shadows between the headstones. They walked to a grave in the southeast corner. Simple marker. Lena Marie Hayes, 1979 to 2012. Beloved wife, mother, advocate. Jerome knelt. Naomi stood beside him. His hands moved, signing to the stone. I went back to the work, like you would have wanted. It took me a long time, but I got there. Naomi placed flowers, daisies, Lena's favorite, at the base of the marker. Jerome's throat tightened. I'm sorry it took so long. Naomi's small hand slipped into his. They stayed until the shadows grew too long to see clearly. Then they drove home. On the rooftop that night, the December air was cold enough to see their breath. Jerome had added blankets to their setup. He and Naomi lay on their backs, wrapped warm, looking up at a sky full of winter stars. Naomi's hands moved against the night. Will we stay in Charlotte? Jerome considered the question. For now. Why for now? The work isn't finished. What work? Jerome thought about Lumina Health, about Ivy, about all the hospitals and clinics and places where deaf patients still walked in, afraid they wouldn't be understood. Making sure people can be heard, he signed, in their own language. Naomi processed this. Then her hands pointed up. There's Cassiopeia. Jerome followed her finger. The W-shaped constellation, bright against the winter dark. You remember the myth? He signed. The queen who was too proud. And what happened? She had to learn to be humble. Jerome's hands moved slowly, tracing the constellation's shape in the air. The gods placed her in the sky, not as punishment, as a reminder that everyone, even queens, has something to learn. Naomi was quiet for a moment. The city sounds drifted up from below. Distant traffic, a dog barking, someone's music playing faint and far away. Dad, Naomi signed. Are you glad you helped Ivy? Jerome's hands stilled. He looked at his daughter, 8 years old, bright eyes, Lena's eyes. Yes, he signed. I'm glad. Even though it was hard. Especially because it was hard. Naomi smiled. She turned her attention back to the stars. What constellation should we learn next? She signed. Jerome looked up at the infinite sky, at all the patterns humans had drawn between points of light, at all the stories waiting to be told. He smiled and signed back. Whichever one you choose. They lay there in the cold December night, father and daughter, wrapped in blankets and starlight. The work unfinished, but the path forward clear. Some stories don't end with perfect resolution. They end with people choosing, every day, to keep learning the languages that matter, to keep showing up, to keep listening, not because it's easy, because it's right.